Choose your sacrifice wisely. Jordan Peterson's best advice to young adults. What if I told you that every single choice you make in life is, at its core, a sacrifice? That even when you think you're avoiding pain, you're merely choosing a different form of suffering? This is the reality that many people refuse to acknowledge. And yet, understanding this fundamental truth is the key to shaping your future in a way that is meaningful, purposeful, and sustainable. You see, life is not a playground. It's a battleground. Every moment you spend, every action you take, every decision you make is a trade-off. If you choose comfort today, you sacrifice growth tomorrow. If you choose discipline today, you sacrifice ease in the present but gain strength in the future. The question is not whether you will sacrifice something, the question is what you will sacrifice, and whether the sacrifice you choose will lead to the life you truly want. Think about it. What happens when you choose laziness over effort? You may enjoy the temporary relief of not working hard, but you're sacrificing future opportunities, momentum, and self-respect. What happens when you avoid conflict instead of addressing the difficult conversations that need to be had? You sacrifice authenticity, integrity, and the possibility of deeper relationships. Sacrifice is inevitable. And yet, most people refuse to consciously choose their sacrifices. They drift through life, avoiding discomfort, but in doing so, they unknowingly sacrifice their potential, their ambitions, and their future selves. What are you unconsciously sacrificing right now?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Jordan Peterson famously argues that the highest form of being is not to seek happiness, but to pursue something meaningful enough that it justifies the suffering of existence itself. Because make no mistake, life is suffering. There is no path you can take that avoids pain entirely, but there is a path where the suffering you endure is worth it, where the price you pay leads to something greater, something profound, something that makes life more than just tolerable, it makes it fulfilling. Here's the harsh reality. If you don't choose your sacrifices wisely, life will choose them for you. The consequences of inaction, avoidance, and denial are just as real as the consequences of effort, responsibility, and discipline. The only difference is that choosing your sacrifice puts you in control. It allows you to suffer for a purpose rather than suffering simply because you fail to act. Let's take a practical example. Imagine two young adults. One of them chooses to prioritize short-term pleasure, partying, wasting time, avoiding responsibility, and seeking the easy way out. The other chooses discipline, studying, working hard, building skills, and delaying gratification. In the moment, the first person seems to be winning. They have fun, they avoid stress, they live for today. But what happens in 10 years? The first person, who avoided sacrifice, now faces a much greater pain, lack of purpose, financial struggles, regret, and the realization that they wasted their potential. The second person, who voluntarily took on difficulty, now has options, respect, stability, and confidence. They suffered for something rather than suffering because they refused to make a choice. But how do you know which sacrifices are worth making? This is where your values come into play. What do you truly care about? What kind of life do you want to build? If you don't know the answers to these questions, you will be lost, making random sacrifices without understanding their purpose. So, ask yourself, what is worth suffering for? What pain am I willing to endure to achieve something greater? What am I currently sacrificing that I will regret in 10 years? These are not easy questions, but they are the questions that separate those who live with purpose from those who drift aimlessly, wondering why life never seems to go their way. The hidden cost of avoidance, why running from sacrifice leads to greater suffering. Most people believe that if they avoid difficult choices, they are avoiding suffering. But this is the greatest illusion of all. Avoidance does not eliminate suffering, it only postpones it, compounds it, and makes it unavoidable in the worst possible way. Life demands payment, and if you refuse to pay the price of discipline, effort, and responsibility, life will extract a far greater price from you, one that you do not get to choose. Imagine someone who avoids dealing with their health. They eat whatever they want, neglect exercise, and ignore warning signs from their body. In the short term, they avoid discomfort. They don't feel the pain of discipline, of saying no to junk food, of pushing through a workout. But what happens in 5, 10, or 20 years? They don't just suffer the consequences in the form of poor health. They suffer regret, limitation, and the knowledge that they could have prevented their own decline. That is the cost of avoidance. Same principle applies to every area of life. If you avoid difficult conversations, you don't eliminate conflict. You allow it to grow in the shadows until it becomes unbearable. If you avoid taking responsibility for your finances, you don't escape money problems, you just delay them until they become a crisis. If you avoid confronting your fears, you don't become fearless. You become controlled by the very thing you refuse to face. Every time you run from sacrifice, you are making a subconscious choice. You are choosing to suffer later in a way that is out of your control. And often, that suffering is far worse than the temporary discomfort you were trying to avoid in the first place. This is why so many people live in quiet desperation, trapped by the consequences of their inaction, wondering why life seems so unfair. But life is not unfair. It is simply responding to the choices they made, whether consciously or unconsciously. The truth is, sacrifice is not just about giving something up. It is about trading up. It is about choosing a greater future over a lesser present. It is about deciding that the pain of discipline is preferable to the pain of regret. And yet, so many people fail to see this because they are trapped in a short-term mindset. They focus on what is easy now rather than what is best later. They choose comfort today, not realizing that they are sacrificing far more in the long run. But here's the paradox. The more you train yourself to embrace sacrifice, the less painful it becomes. When you willingly take on responsibility, you develop strength. When you choose to face hardship, you build resilience. When you voluntarily endure suffering for a purpose, you gain control over your own life. This is why the greatest people in history, the ones who built empires, created revolutionary ideas, and changed the world, were not those who avoided sacrifice, but those who embraced it fully. Think about the people you admire the most. Whether they are leaders, thinkers, artists, or athletes, they all have one thing in common. They chose to suffer for something greater. They were willing to endure pain, struggle, and setbacks because they knew the alternative, an easy, meaningless life, was a far worse fate. What separates them from the average person is not talent, luck, or privilege. It is the willingness to sacrifice comfort for greatness. So why do so few people follow this path? Because sacrifice requires faith. It requires believing that the pain you endure today will lead to something better tomorrow. And in a world that glorifies instant gratification, that kind of faith is rare. People want results now, pleasure now. They are unwilling to plant seeds and wait for them to grow. They expect rewards without effort, and when they don't get them, they blame everything but themselves. But here's the brutal truth. You cannot escape sacrifice, but you can choose it wisely. You can sacrifice your time building skills, or you can sacrifice your future struggling in mediocrity. You can sacrifice your comfort by going to the gym, or you can sacrifice your health by avoiding it. You can sacrifice your pride by admitting when you're wrong, or you can sacrifice your relationships by refusing to change. No matter what, you are always paying a price. The only question is whether the price you pay is worth it. And here's where things get even deeper. The sacrifices you make do not just affect you, they affect everyone around you. If you choose to sacrifice comfort and develop yourself into a strong, capable person, you don't just improve your own life, you become a pillar of strength for others. You inspire, you lead, you contribute. But if you refuse to make sacrifices, you don't just suffer alone, you become a burden to those around you. Your weaknesses become their responsibility. Your failures become their problem. This is why Jordan Peterson emphasizes the importance of carrying a burden. He argues that the path to meaning is not through avoiding hardship, but through choosing your hardship consciously. If you do not take on responsibility, you will eventually be crushed by the weight of your own neglected life. And if you refuse to bear that weight, someone else will have to carry it for you. Your family, your friends, your children. So ask yourself, What burdens are you avoiding right now? What sacrifices are you refusing to make? And are you truly prepared to face the consequences of that avoidance? Because in the end, the universe does not care about your excuses. It does not care if you were tired, scared, or uncertain. It only responds to action. The people who take responsibility and make sacrifices shape their own future. The people who refuse to do so are shaped by forces beyond their control. Which path will you choose? The burden of greatness. Why responsibility is the ultimate sacrifice. There is a reason why most people never achieve what they are truly capable of. It is not because they lack intelligence, talent, or opportunity. It is because they refuse to bear the weight of responsibility. Responsibility is heavy. It demands effort, discipline, and the willingness to accept that your life is in your hands. And that is terrifying for many people. Because if you accept that you are responsible for your future, then you must also accept that your failures are, in large part, your own doing. But here's the truth that most people don't want to hear. The price of avoiding responsibility is far greater than the price of embracing it. If you refuse to take control of your life, someone else will. If you do not decide your own purpose, society will impose one on you. If you do not work to build your own dreams, you will spend your life working to build someone else's. This is the reality of existence. Those who step forward and take responsibility carve their own destiny, while those who shrink back become mere spectators in their own lives. Responsibility is the ultimate sacrifice because it requires you to give up the comforting illusion that life is happening to you. It forces you to confront the brutal reality that you are the architect of your own suffering and success. And that is a terrifying realization, because it means there is no one left to blame. No parents, no teachers, no government, no society. Just you and the choices you make every single day. This is why Jordan Peterson insists that meaning is found not in pleasure, but in responsibility. When you take on responsibility, you willingly suffer for something greater than yourself. You endure stress, hardship, and discomfort, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you recognize that the alternative, a life of avoidance and passivity, is far worse. A life with no responsibility is a life with no meaning, and a life with no meaning is nothing more than a slow, painful descent into nihilism and despair. But responsibility is not just about achieving success. It is about becoming someone capable of handling success. This is what most people fail to understand. They want wealth, but they are not responsible enough to manage it. They want power, but they are not responsible enough to wield it wisely. They want respect, but they are not responsible enough to earn it. The universe does not reward those who simply want. It rewards those who prove they are capable of handling what they desire, and proof comes through sacrifice. Think about the greatest people in history, leaders, innovators, revolutionaries. What made them extraordinary was not that they were born special, but that they willingly took on burdens that others refused to carry. They accepted responsibility when others ran from it. They made sacrifices that others were unwilling to make, and because of that, they shaped the world instead of being shaped by it. So ask yourself, what responsibility are you avoiding? What burden should you be carrying right now, but aren't? And what is that avoidance costing you? Because here is the harsh truth. If you refuse to carry your burden, life will not simply let you walk away unscathed. The weight of your neglected responsibilities will grow heavier with time. The longer you avoid them, the more painful they become. A small financial problem ignored today becomes a crippling debt in the future. A lack of discipline today becomes a life of regret tomorrow. Every responsibility you neglect does not disappear, it multiplies, until one day it crushes you completely. But there is another path, the path of voluntary sacrifice, the path of choosing to carry the heaviest burden you can bear, not because you have to, but because by doing so you become stronger. This is where true meaning is found, not in comfort, not in pleasure, but in the struggle to become something more than you are today. So the question is not whether life will be hard. Life is hard. The question is whether you will choose a hardship that strengthens you or a hardship that breaks. Whether you will willingly take on responsibility or whether responsibility will come crashing down on you when you least expect it. There is no escaping this choice, there is only the illusion that you can avoid it. Which path will you take? The price of becoming who you were meant to be. There is a version of you that exists in the future, one that is stronger, wiser, more disciplined, and more capable than you are today. That version of you does not come into existence by accident. It is not the result of luck, talent, or external circumstances. It is the result of sacrifice. The price of becoming who you were meant to be is paid in suffering, discipline, and a willingness to endure discomfort for a purpose greater than yourself. Most people never meet that version of themselves. They stop at the first sign of difficulty. They refuse to pay the price. They choose distraction over focus, comfort over challenge, and excuses over action. And as a result, they remain trapped in a lesser version of themselves, not because they are incapable, but because they are unwilling to endure the necessary suffering that transformation requires. But what if you made a different choice? What if, instead of avoiding sacrifice, you embraced it? What if you accepted that the pain of discipline is far better than the pain of regret? What if you decided right now that you will no longer run from responsibility, but instead you will seek it out? That you will willingly carry the heaviest burden you can bear, not because it is easy, but because it is meaningful. This is the truth that so many ignore. You are always becoming something. Every decision you make shapes you. Every action, every habit, every sacrifice, whether conscious or unconscious, is constructing the person you will be in the future. The question is not whether you will change, but whether you will change intentionally or by default. Whether you will shape yourself into the person you admire, or whether you will drift into mediocrity because you refuse to take control. At the end of your life, you will look back and see the sum of your choices. You will either see a path of intentional sacrifice leading to a life of meaning, or you will see a trail of avoidance, excuses, and wasted potential, and in that moment, you will realize something terrifying. No one else was responsible for the outcome but you. So ask yourself, right now, who are you becoming? Are you making the sacrifices necessary to become the person you were meant to be? Or are you avoiding them, hoping that somehow you will reach greatness without paying the price? Because in the end, life gives you exactly what you earn, not what you wish for, not what you dream about, but what you have the courage to suffer for. And the greatest tragedy is not failing, it is realizing too late that you never even tried. The choice is yours. Choose your sacrifice wisely.